take us through the process that led Michigan to Dusty May, because I had one person describe it to me as quote unquote shockingly competent, the way that they were able to land him and reel in the big fish. And really, it seemed like they had their eyes set on Dusty at the top with a pretty wide gap, maybe not a wide gap between everyone else, but they had their guy, they identified him, and in comes John Beeline to help close the deal. And Michigan has its new coach.
Yeah, it's funny that people don't want to give him any credit, and people say we don't want to give Ward Manuel credit, which is absolutely not true. We credited everybody for this, including Ward Manuel, who we've been critical of, and we will continue to be critical of people that we think deserve it, whether it's John Beeline, which usually never was, except for maybe a year or two. I remember that game against Ohio State when you were really starting to question the direction when they lost at home, and then boom, they turn it around and go on the run, and you're like, man, because there was a lot of heat, but then all of a sudden, we always knew he was a great basketball coach, right? Anyway, I digress. Basically, what happened is on Saturday, as you guys know, I was up north on a water slide, had the phone with me, and we had gotten word that Michigan was going to be in Florida. There were all kinds of rumors about Dusty May in Louisville, and we knew that Dusty May was high on the list, not high on Ward Manuel's list. We know that last Wednesday, that John Beeline was contacted for the first time Wednesday to be part of the search. And he said, okay, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And he had his own list of names. Dusty May, I know that he was high on him and speaking to people extremely close to him, as well as Ward Manuel being high on him as well. So seemed like he had emerged as the number one candidate. And when Louisville was extremely confident, Michigan knew that they were going to be meeting with him on Saturday as well and have an opportunity here. John Beeline, who has a place down in Florida now, drove over, was part of that as well. There are all kinds of BS narratives out there about, who turned on Ward Manuel to Dusty May and all this crap. I wish I could tell you guys what we know about Dusty May's time at Eastern Michigan and stuff and things like that, but we aren't going to go there. What we will say is that Dusty May became a candidate. We know that he loves John Beeline, and one of the guys that was a good friend of his that used to work with him, who's a friend of mine, said that he used to use John Beeline's stuff and send it to him when they would compare notes. He studied John Beeline, had great respect for him. So him being there was absolutely huge, no matter what anybody tells you. John Beeline should be the consigliere of this program, like Jay Wright at Villanova, like Tom Izzo will be at Michigan State. Yeah, people are going to hold that half season at Cleveland against him when he had his own heart issues and stuff like that. Feel free, but that was the golden age of Michigan basketball. But anyway, they go down there. You know what? They have their conversations. John Beeline had his questions. Ward Manuel had his questions, and Dusty May had his questions. The interview went late, fellas, and at about 9:45, right after we closed the water park there, we get a text that Dusty's done at the same time that Woj dropped the Woj bomb for ESPN and said that Dusty May was going to be the next Michigan coach. So just a fantastic get. I think he's a great fit. Everything we've heard about him is that he's an outstanding person. B, he is a basketball junkie who is going to work like crazy. My buddy who worked with him told me that he's going to hit it like Bo Schembechler hit the Michigan football program in 1969, relentless and with a will to win immediately. Sounds like he could very well bring several of his Florida Atlantic players with him. We know that he's going to hit the portal as well. So very good hire. Was number 1A on the list. They got him. Congratulations to Michigan. This is a huge hire, and I think that he's going to do a great job here.
All right, well, Clayton, let me bounce to you now. I mean, I wanted to, when it comes to Dusty May, the candidate, and now Dusty May, the Michigan head basketball coach, what do you like about what he brings to the table from, a profile standpoint and what Michigan needs in its next head coach?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is a fantastic hire. I would grade it an A. The one question I would say is, doing it at this level is different. For some guys work out, some guys don't. Obviously, at some point, you have to make that jump if you're going to. And all the guys like a Beeline and everybody else did. So, you can't hold that against him. But what he did at 6 years, in 6 years at Florida Atlantic is pretty ridiculous. He took them to unprecedented heights. They had never had 3 straight winning seasons in league play. They do so 4 straight years, his final 4 years. And speaking of Final Fours, that getting there in 2023, extremely improbable, extremely impressive that they were able to do that. They followed up this year with the second winningest season in program history with 25 wins. And that was a disappointment relative to expectations. And Dusty May said so after they lost in overtime to Northwestern in the first round of the tournament. So, but, the way he was able to build it, the way that after last year and all the success they had with standout players, like some of them that could be coming to Michigan, he was able to retain that entire roster. Great relationships with all those guys, identified guys like Vlad Golden, who's from Russia, so has a really good eye for talent and a good evaluator as well. I like that about him. I like the style he plays. I think Michigan had about 7 or 8 power forwards on the roster each and every year over the last 5 or so. That's not going to be the case with Dusty May. There's going to be a lot more guards than forwards. They play, they prioritize shooting. They play with space and pace, is kind of the philosophy. Defensively, they don't like to help all that much. Sounds familiar to, what we saw with Luke Yaklich at the end of John Beilein's tenure there at Michigan and how good they were. You need good individual defenders to do it, but there's a lot to like about Dusty May. And then you add in the element, like I mentioned earlier, Louisville wanted him. Vanderbilt wanted him, not that Vanderbilt's some great program, but I mean, basically everyone this cycle that had an opening had him at the top of their list. And it was Michigan, despite the rumors on this platform or that platform, that was able to reel him in. Dusty May talked on a radio show today and said he was reading it on Twitter too. He's like, it's not true at all. I haven't accepted anything. I have a meeting tonight in person. This is him talking about his day on Saturday with Michigan. He was impressed with the group they sent over. Obviously, Chris, you just talked about that with Coach B and everything else, and they were able to get it done. So there's a lot to like, and he now has a lot of work ahead of him, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah, and to me, when I look at the Dusty May hire too, a lot of people, something I saw a lot of throughout the search and throughout certainly on Saturday is, oh, well, I don't know I think Dusty May might be overrated. Would we even talk about him if they don't beat Memphis last year? And I'd say, why deal in the hypothetical? The fact is that they did make the NCAA tournament run they did last year. Winning one game in the tournament is difficult enough, let alone winning 4 of them, to take the national runner-up in San Diego State to a game where you lose by 1 point. And then obviously we saw, this year, a bit, given what expectations were, a little bit disappointing. But on the same token, beat a couple tournament teams. They beat Arizona, who's still in the big dance. He did this at Florida Atlantic. He didn't do it at Florida or Florida State or some, any other type of school that has a, basketball pedigree. He took them from chicken, what, and made chicken salad out of it. And now, again, I think that something that strikes me with all this is that given the fact that he was maybe the highest caliber or that white whale of this cycle, I mean, I actually thought the $3.75 million, the salary number that Michigan threw out there yesterday was kind of interesting to me because 1, I don't know that they typically include salary in their releases. And 2, it kind of seems like a little bit cheaper than what some of the experts out there thought that they'd be able to get him there at, which tells me that not only was he sold on Michigan being a potentially better job than, your Louisvilles of the world, but whatever was part of that conversation, whether it be admissions, whether it be the transfer portal, whether it be recruiting. And I do think, the bones of what he's going to want to do still operate on the recruiting trail. There's been this narrative that he built Florida Atlantic out of the portal. I think their big 3 were all homegrown guys, if I'm not mistaken. So to me, I think that whatever Michigan's pitch to him was, 1, encouraging that he's, signed on for that. And 2, the fact that you could get the best candidate in this coaching carousel, so to speak, to sell, to sell that type of vision to him must mean that Michigan might have its, together a lot more than people are giving them credit for.
Yeah. You know what? I think they found a guy who thought that it was his right fit. Right. And sometimes you get those and sometimes you don't, fellas. But this time they had a guy that thought, okay, this is where I want to be. His son was born in Ann Arbor when he was at Eastern Michigan at one of the Michigan hospitals. Again, he still has some ties here. I'm sure of it. But a lot of people said he didn't want to be in that fishbowl. He didn't want to be that guy. Like, remember when Nick Saban landed in Alabama when he was hired and he had a bunch of I was going to say hillbillies, but I don't think that's fair. A bunch of fans chasing the plane and you know, coming after him and running after him when he got off the tarmac. That was crazy, a crazy scene. You're not going to get that with Michigan basketball, and you're not going to get that with many schools, frankly. But you know what? At a place like Louisville or at a place like Kentucky or something like that, automatically, you know, if you do something where they don't like it, they're going to let you know about it. I think Michigan fans are going to be patient. Michigan fans can be passionate about their teams, and I will go and single out Atlanta in the Final Four. You could not get a ticket. There were so many Michigan fans down there, fellas, in 2013. When I went to Staples Center in LA for the tournament, they took over Staples Center. Everywhere I've been, they were so well represented. Whether it was, I think it was Wichita, Kansas, Des Moines, Iowa, there were tons of Michigan fans there. So is it more of a fickle fan base? Yes. But when John Beilein was there and Clay and Anthony, you guys were both there, that place came down and was packed most nights, especially in Big Ten play when John Beilein's teams were humming. And I was just watching some clips that Nick Stauskas put on Twitter. God, I miss that guy. He was so fun to watch, and the offense and how well coached those teams were. I envision Dusty May, by the time he's 55 years old, where John Beilein was when he came to Michigan, being one of those guys that, okay, he's got every other part of his program down. Now he's going to be an X's and O's guru as well. I think he's already good there. I think he's got room to get better, and I think he will. So extremely excited about the hire, just everything I've heard, and the unsolicited praise from Indiana fans and not just fans, but one of my colleagues who I respect more than anybody, Mike Pegram, who I used to work with over at Rivals, said, he just sent me an email. He said, you're going to find out that this guy is pretty special. And it does remind me a little bit of the Beilein hire when people were coming unsolicited. You're going to love this guy. He's going to do a great job there. Some hires you don't know, right? Like we were hopeful on Juwan Howard. We were hopeful on Brady Hoke. We knew Jim Harbaugh was a home run. We knew that John Beilein was a home run. I'm hopeful plus with Dusty May. I feel really, really good about the hire.
Yeah, I think fit is a word we're going to hear a lot tomorrow at his introductory press conference. The interview he did, and I'll give him credit to, 106.3 FM in Palm Beach. Go seek that out. We wrote an article on it just a little bit ago. But a couple things. One, the way that this guy who is the host, and he's the play-by-play announcer, it sounds like, for Florida Atlantic, the way he interacted with Dusty and the respect that he clearly has for him, it was really telling as well. I'm sure this guy would reach out as well and say some really good things about Dusty May from a media standpoint. But, but Dusty said, like you said, Chris, his son was born here. They lived here for a year when they were at Eastern Michigan. He understands the brand. He understands what Ann Arbor is all about. And when he was down the road and kind of in the shadow at Michigan, they understood what, the passion that Michigan fans have, like you're talking about. And, I think that's going to be big for him. Now, I would hope, that he was given some assurances, and part of Ward Manuel's pitch was the support that they're going to have, and maybe it would be easier to get somebody in or the NIL program. We already see Champion Circle opening up a fund there for, fans to donate, and they can donate to the NIL. But the facilities, I know that they met in Fort Lauderdale, not in Ann Arbor. But now he's here. He's probably sitting in on the phone and recruiting and everything and walking around the PDC right now. But the facilities are night and day compared to what he had at Florida Atlantic. His office, from what I read at Florida Atlantic, backs up into a janitor's closet, and there's like construction going on constantly. He said it's like, it sounds like a dentist chair or something across the other side of the wall. And they would have to sneak into the football building's weight room if they wanted to, get a lift in over there when they could, if the football team was on spring break or whatever. So that's what they're dealing with. The $33 million was the budget for Florida Atlantic's athletic department last year. Michigan's was $215 million. So I just think he saw that. And probably John Beilein's talked about this too, and I'd like to hear Dusty May's thoughts on it. But being at a football school is attractive for a basketball coach. Beilein talked about how it was kind of always his goal to get to one of those football powers. So I want to hear Dusty May's thoughts about that as well. But fit is going to be that word. It just felt like it was the right fit. He's from Peoria, Illinois. He's a Midwest guy. He said he watched the Big Ten every day of his life growing up. So it just feels like the perfect fit.
Yeah, and that's the biggest key with all of it. And again, maybe we should set an over-under for the amount of times we hear fit tomorrow.
I just said it like 8 times. So
what's the over-under? Okay. What's the over-under on Dinkelman?
Probably 0.5. We just went over. So The one thing
Nobody's
that's
gonna beat
apparent to
that.
me, we've gotten a couple questions about play style. I mean, when you just look at kind of the profile of what his teams, at least the last 2 years, have looked like, they do play smaller. It's kind of Beeline-esque in that regard. I think they had, Janelle Davis was playing the 4. He's like 6'4", 205 or something like that. So, they do play smaller. They're going to take a lot of threes. It just, when you talk about guys that are Beeline-esque, you even look at the offensive style. You can see some of the similarities there. And he's going to drop stuff to get guys good shots. Defensively, you're going to see a lot of drop coverage, it seems like. And it also seems like a guy that's going to tailor the team to the strengths of the personnel. So we'll have to see what happens there. And obviously, a lot of that's going to come down to what the roster looks like. And as of right now, there are 4 scholarship guys that do have eligibility to return. Terrence Williams, Damari Burnett have a 5th year to use if they elect to do so. Will Cheddar still has 2 years of eligibility. Jace Howard still technically around. We'll see what he winds up deciding to do. And then you've got guys in the transfer portal for Michigan. You've got this big 3 from Florida Atlantic that will have options now, you would think. And whether some of them come with Dusty, all of them come, remains to be seen. But Chris, I mean, what's the next step here in terms of putting a roster together? Because I don't know. It's going to take a lot of work for them to get to the 13 allotted scholarships, but you'd have to think that they'll be able to, there's a lot of work to do, like you said, very quickly.
And you don't need 13, really. I was watching a game the other day. John Beeline used to play 7 guys sometimes. Ideally, you'll have more than that, right? Especially if you want to compete for a championship. But to me, a guy like Will Cheddar is going to find this very attractive. He'll be a role player, I think, for Dusty May. I don't think there's any question about it. We've heard good things about the potential of Terrace Reed coming back. Who knows? But we'll find out. We do believe he will bring some of his guys here. The one thing I will say is that if he does bring those guys as grad transfers from Florida Atlantic, that then the following year is going to be a big one, right? But Christian Anderson is a kid who committed. I'm going to be writing a story about him tomorrow morning that wants to stay. And he's looking for the right fit. And you know what? He loves Michigan, and he loved Juwan Howard, obviously, and they identified him early in the process. But I think they are pretty encouraged by in trading texts with his dad, pretty encouraged by the hire. So Darrell Brooks, Clayton Safey's guy, over at Catholic Central. I think they used to play together at one time. Is that true back in the day?
No.
Okay. Well, all right. But regardless, you know what? These are guys that I think are extremely really committed to the school and interested in seeing what kind of culture Dusty May. We use that word a lot, guys. Juwan Howard used it a lot, but it was clear that there were some cracks in the foundation by the end of it. I think it was time. I think most people would agree it was really time for a change in a different direction, even though Juwan Howard did some good things here. But culture is everything, as John Beeline taught us. You can't have the dust-ups, right, with your strength coach. You can't have some of the stuff that was going on in the building that we won't discuss. That was really disappointing to hear. And you can't have the academic difficulties that Doug McDaniel did and those kinds of things if you want to have a successful basketball program. So anyway, I trust that they aren't going to have any of these issues under Dusty May.